The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Everyone, and welcome to Triversity Talk. I'm Wendy Stewart, and again, always happy to be with all of you on Wednesday night. You know, it's Hump Day Wednesday, right? And this show really just gives me the extra oomph that I need to get through the week, and I hope it does that for you too as well. So I'm coming to you from New York City, but Triversity, as you know, is located in Milford, Pennsylvania, and I have a couple of things to share with you about Triversity, the Pride Center, things that are happening. First of all, a very important school board meeting tomorrow night. I believe it is starting at 6:00 at Delaware Valley High School. But to get further details, please go to our Facebook page, Triversity, the Pride Center. And it's also would be on our website as well to get further details. If you are in the Milford, Pennsylvania area, please come and speak out. There is a lot that's now at stake. And without really going into detail on that, again, you can find more information on that on our Triversity Facebook page. So mark it on your calendar for tomorrow night at 6:00. I also want to let everybody know we are looking for people, both teens and adults, for our wonderful creative 6-week program called I Am What I Am. We handle both creative writing and art in this program, and we'll be meeting on Saturday. I believe it's an hour and a half for adults and then an hour and a half for teens, or maybe it's the other way around, but you get the drift. I Am What I Am. You talk about who are you? You know, what was coming out like for you? What is it like being an ally? You know, how has that changed your life? Do you want to share that in writing or in drawing? Anyway, we have really great facilitators working with us. So it is a 6-week program. I believe it starts April 11th. Please, once again, go to the Triversity Facebook page or on our website for more information. So, I love our guest tonight. He happens to be a personal friend. He is just an amazing person. Our guest tonight is the publisher and vice president of The Advocate and Out magazine, which are the longest standing LGBTQ publications out there, which when you think about what the world of publishing has been like, this is so amazing to me. As the publisher, our guests will share what are the responsibilities. You know, this is a very big, responsible job to have. And especially in these times, you know, what kind of content are they responsible for getting out there? What are the challenges? How do you sustain the financial health of such a brand? I have so many questions for our guests. So without further ado, please welcome Mark Isom.
Hey, Wendy, it's great to be here.
It is here. We're here like virtually. We're not like really here in the biblical sense, right? We're in the flat virtual here. Right. I guess I am grateful for that, right? Because this show can go on all over the country and my guests come from everywhere. But you know what? It's nothing like sitting at a bar, having a cocktail with somebody face to face. But true. You know what? I am just thrilled to have you here. I know how busy you are. You have a lot of responsibility with what you do. And thank you. Before we started tonight, you shared with me The Advocate is celebrating its 60th year.
I know. Isn't that incredible?
It really is incredible. I wonder now, is anyone planning, and I had this thought after you said that, if someone were to create this amazing timeline, right, of what's happened in LGBTQ history, right, from when the advocate first came about to now, that would really be interesting to see.
Yeah, and if you think about it, Wendy, the Advocate was founded in 1967, so pre-Stonewall.
It was
So
pre-Stonewall. Yeah,
so it really covers the entire, modern day gay civil rights movement.
right,
And you can look at the 70s when we were fighting for our rights, and all through the AIDS crisis and the advent of protease inhibitors, marriage equality. I mean, it's really incredible that we as a community have that kind of archive where we're
right.
telling stories about ourselves.
Yeah, and I love that you use the word as a community because I emphasize this to people now more than ever. There can be no schisms in the community now. We all really have to stick together in these times. It's very incredible times. You know what made me think of the timeline? I thought if we started right in the late 60s and then rolled it into the 70s, and then like if there would be parallels to what is now to what was then.
Well, it's so interesting because one of the things we do in the Advocate is go back into the archives. And we do this pretty regularly where we'll take a story from, the 70s, 80s, 90s, whenever, and republish it. And then opposite it, do an update. So it could be on an issue, it could be on a crime, it could be, on anything that the Advocate covered. And it's really interesting to see, in some cases, how things have changed, some cases, how they've stayed the same, in some cases, how they may have, gotten worse.
Right.
But it's really great to have that history and that archive.
Right. And to be able to share that with people. It's interesting because now that you mention it, you do that. I didn't think of that, but yeah. Okay, I think that that is something that is really important to do. We talk about this with a lot of our younger LGBTQ members. They're coming up in a different time, totally different time.
Yes.
And a lot of the groundwork that was laid, all the great things that happened were laid prior to them coming of age. Now
Mhm.
they're coming of age in these times. And what's interesting is what their perspective is on things.
Well, right. And, so many of them were born, post AIDS crisis
Yeah,
when HIV is a manageable disease. Um, you know, some of the marriage, they've grown up with marriage equality.
right,
And, and during the Obama years, there were fights, but it was nothing like the assault we're under now.
right,
And, I think it's a reminder to this generation that, we have to fight for our rights.
right. Right. Well, I started out this segment by talking about the school board, and it's not just the school board, it's school boards all over the country. And in the past couple of years, as you are well aware, we've gone through banning of the books, the censorship of the books. I can honestly tell you with Triversity, we have a fabulous library. We have the banned book library. We get all of these.
I know you
Great.
do.
We are bursting at the seams there. We have a
Your
lot of
banned
books.
books.
Right, banned books. But when you think about it, oh my God,
It's
that's going
crazy.
on. How have
Books.
you, how
Huh?
as a publisher, how have you dealt with that? Have you gotten like evil fan mail, like people that stalk the Advocate and write
Can I
bad
tell
things?
occasionally, but overwhelmingly, the kind of response we get is really positive. It's one for thanks. It's one of gratitude that we have our history and are still publishing. You certainly get trolls on social media and on digital, but what's interesting is, and I handle our publishing. I'm not responsible for digital per
Right.
se, but our digital audience is really composed of community members and allies. When the Bud Light controversy happened what is
Yeah.
it now? It's going to be 3 years ago.
I was going to say 3 years. Yeah.
Um, you know, that was really an awful thing to do to Dylan Mulvaney, where they just threw her out there
Right.
without thinking about the unintended consequence of people who will weaponize her content. And we covered the depth and breadth of what's happening in the community, but we have never had really any kind of backlash necessarily to our stories. It's interesting. I'm sure, people who aren't allies and who aren't part of the LGBTQ community, visit out.com and advocate.com and pride.com. But we have really not been assaulted like that. Our battles are with the chilling effect that the administration is having on everything related to our community.
Right. Well, and I brought up the school board, tomorrow night's school board meeting. You probably got something about it too, but they want to remove anything that will protect LGBTQ students, and including the bathroom situation, which to me, I thought all that was a done deal. I remember when we got all this through and everything was fine. I think what shakes me up is in the Constitution in Pennsylvania, this is all okay, and yet now it's not okay. So our constitutional rights are being overridden by a lawless administration. That's what's so scary to me, and it's making people feel like they have no ability to fight back.
Well, and I think it's important to remember that nothing is ever a done deal where we're concerned.
That's
we
good
have
point.
to remain vigilant. We have to fight. The trans community is in the crosshairs of the administration, and that's getting all the play. But there are cases making their way through the courts to overturn gay marriage.
I know.
There's so many hot spots, and you have to remain vigilant to all of them.
Right. Yeah, and understood with especially with what you're doing. But do you ever personally have like days where you're like, I spend a lot of my time, and this about me, lifting people up. I do. I'm out in the community all the time because I've watched what has happened in the last couple of years, let's just say. And I don't want people to lose their mojo. I don't want them to lose their fight. I totally feel, and if you watch this show, I put people on that are out there really attempting to do something, and it's not a done deal. None of it's a done deal.
No, it's not.
How do you keep your mojo going?
Well, just in terms of what we cover, we have to cover the news of the day as it happens, and there's a lot of hard news and challenging news. What I think we always try to do, though, is deliver some kind of hope. We have 3 different brands.
Yes.
We have the Advocate, which is for lack of a better word, news. It's
harder news, hard news.
On digital, it is what happens that day, and in print, we look at larger issues. But Out was created in 1992, Wendy, at the height of the AIDS crisis,
right.
Because there was so much bad news, and it was really founded to look at gay excellence, at things that people doing amazing things.
Right.
and you know, so you have to balance it, and you have to, you know, you also have to look at those good news stories. You know, you can, you know, you can cover a news story, but talk to people about it who are inspirational and who can give hope.
Agreed. Right.
You
Right.
know, it's how you tell it.
It's how you tell it, and it's got to do with who you talk to, because if if you talk to someone that's got a really dark, pessimistic outlook on it, that's what they're going to share with
Yeah,
you, you know.
but you have to do it also by being real, right? I mean, we're not in the business of fake news. I mean, we have
Right.
to say
Oh,
what's
wait,
happening.
we're not. Oh my God.
We're not.
Let me just say, because I go on about this a lot. When that terminology first came out, and my late husband, who you knew, Alan, when it first came out, I'm like, this is the beginning of the end. And I kept saying that. And he says, why does this bother you so much? I'm like, don't you get it? I said, they just said that the color red is really purple. Everything that you believed about the color red isn't true. Now it's purple. And it doesn't matter if you see it as red, because they're telling you it's purple. It is the ultimate in the Emperor's New Clothes. And when people tell me all the time, they can't understand the mindset or the hate set
Mm.
of people towards the LGBTQ community, I totally get it. It's completely turned around, twisted thinking. You have the ill-informed, but you
Mhm.
also have, and you know about advertising, right? You understand subliminal advertising. This was the greatest subliminal advertising I've ever seen, and nobody even realized it was happening.
Yeah, it's I mean, you're right. And you know, you could, and now people are so invested in believing that red is purple, to use your
Absolutely.
analogy,
Yeah.
that to admit that red is red totally affects their belief system. It's like, you know, they can't do it, admit it, even when it's staring them in the face.
No, exactly. They'll just find an excuse for it. So, if you can take us through your background a little bit, where were you born? No, you just,
I was born in Dallas, Texas,
oh my
and my
God.
family moved to New York when I was 5.
Oh, okay, so you grew up in New York,
I grew up
right?
in New York City in Westchester County.
Oh, I didn't realize I love Westchester, and I keep my car.
Mamaroneck and Rye.
Oh
Mamaroneck
my
and
God. Yeah, that's beautiful on the sound there.
Mhm.
You're on Metro North then. I keep my car in Croton. I take Metro North. I know I digress. I just wanted to share that with you. So growing up, did you have a penchant for wanting the news, learning the
Yeah,
news?
so I was really into news, uh, weirdly so, um, and then spent over 20 years in TV news as a producer, an executive at different newsrooms, um, across the country. And after that, I was looking for a change and went to work in New York for a media company that really advised brands, you know, how to communicate with different audiences, and you know, what are the most effective techniques, particularly as it related to video.
Wow.
Um, and eventually, I joined Equal Entertainment, which produced a television show called Celebrity Page,
Right.
uh, also founded by a group of former news executives. And then the company, it's going to be 4 years in June, bought Pride Media, which owned Out, The Advocate,
Right.
Pride.com. Um, and uh, actually, with that purchase, returned the titles to LGBTQ ownership. They were not owned by members of the community before
No,
that.
they weren't. I forgot. Right.
So, and so we became, with that acquisition, Equal Pride.
I mean, what an interesting trajectory your career has had. At any point, I have to ask you this because do you know the news person Garrett Glazer? Did you ever
Yes,
meet?
yes, I
Garrett's
know who it is.
I love Garrett. He's great. His new book out a couple of months already. Fairy Boy. I had him come on the show and everything. But regular people like me don't know what goes on in the news, right? And he worked for a number of news stations, affiliates.
Mhm.
It was so interesting. What did you love about it? What did you not like about it?
Well, I think if you do TV news, you're probably to some extent an adrenaline junkie. It is things happen so fast, things can change so fast. I mean, at one point I was a producer of the 5 o'clock news, and you have your lead story and rundown built, and then at 5:30 or 4:30, there's a fire, there's a shooting, there's an arrest, there's something. And so, you have to totally,
Pivot.
rejuggle your show.
You've got to
Right.
pivot. Yeah.
And, you like knowing things first. And, I think on a larger level, it's really exciting to be able to produce content every day and not to sound corny, but really explain what's happening in your local community.
Absolutely. What communities were you working with at that point?
I was in Hartford. I worked for 2 stations in Hartford, the
Yeah.
NBC and CBS affiliate. Gail King was my anchor when I was in Hartford.
Wow.
CBS affiliate. I worked in Dallas and in Minneapolis.
Wow. Yeah, you would know Garrett. I think your paths
Oh,
definitely.
I know who he is. I've seen his
Yeah.
book. I've read parts
Yeah.
of it. I haven't read the whole thing.
Yeah, of course. So in those days, it was interesting because he talked about coming out on television as a reporter. Were you having to be closeted? What was it like for you?
Yeah. I mean, it was just not something that, I talked about.
Private.
It was just private. It was not cool to be gay. And you didn't know who would be okay, who wouldn't be okay with it. And so, you just tended to avoid it, and there were a lot of Christmas parties where I went by myself. Maybe that could have been a clue, but but and what's weird about it, Wendy, is at that time that was the norm, right? In the 80s.
Yeah, we're talking about the 80s. Right.
And I wasn't working in New York. And it wasn't even something that you gave a lot of thought to. It was just kind of the way it was.
Right. And it was the way you had to navigate it because it was your career, it was your job.
And then when you can be out in all parts of your life, it makes a huge difference to your mental health, just to be able to share with work colleagues what you did this weekend with friends or whatever.
Go to the Christmas party with your husband, right?
Oh,
That's something people.
And he likes a party.
He does like a good party, and he can drink. But yeah, of course, you want to be able to do that,
right?
And those were very challenging times. But I think of all the strides that have been made, and here we are now. And the reason I constantly go back to community is it is totally not a done deal what's going on. And I agree with you. What I don't like in the LGBTQ community is a naivete towards things like marriage equality. I have a lot of friends, and I'm sure you do too, that are like, oh, nothing's going to happen with that.
Well, I mean, the same people. I mean, honestly, I remember having a talk with a friend of my parents before Trump was elected the first time, talking about abortion. And I said, they are going to find a way to take it away. And they're like, right. Oh, no, they would never do that. And I think that's a mindset that people are in. And, right. Like I said, if abortion can't be a done deal, how can anything else?
Oh,
especially something like gay marriage that doesn't affect nearly as many people as the abortion issue affects women, right?
right, right. No,
They were
you're
they were willing. I mean, obviously they're women across the spectrum and have different feelings about abortion, but they weren't worried about ticking. I was going to say a bad word, but they weren't.
you
They
say bad
weren't.
words on the show. I've had people use a lot of bad words on this
They
show.
weren't. They didn't care about pissing off more than half of the population, right? With that,
Right.
and so we're what 10% of the population. Um, why wouldn't they
Right. Right.
if they could?
But, look at the 10%. It's a very powerful 10%, you
Well,
know?
and I'll tell you, I think the good thing about it is that, um, I think I don't want to say most people, but there are gay people in everyone's family, and
Thank you. Right.
when someone, it's harder um, to work against their interests. I have a lot of family in Texas, um,
I was gonna
and
ask, yeah.
and in rural Texas, and I am the only one on that side of the family who is gay and married, and I think they would have been, if they didn't know me, if they didn't go to my wedding, if they didn't know Jamie, I think their viewpoint on gay marriage would be different. And so to have the visibility we have, because and obviously there are many families that don't support their gay children, but
There are many.
there are a lot of families that do. And I think having gay couples as part of families and extended family gatherings really make people think and can really break down barriers. That's one reason I think, you and I both have homes in Pike County, which is pretty red. But, I think it's important for people to see us in the community, to get to know us and help break down some of those barriers.
Well, I agree. And, obviously, I've been with Triversity from the very beginning. Patty Tomaszewski started it. I was one of her original board members. I'm the only one left, right? And now we're 14 or 15 years. I've seen a lot of stuff. But when I came to Pike County, and I have to be honest with you, um, people were in different political parties. It was fine. I volunteered for everything. I work with all kinds of
Right.
people, and gay, straight, Republican, independent. There was nothing that existed now. What the challenges I am having with Pike County, and I love it there, and I'm committed to Triversity, but I have to tell you, there have been times where I've had to just not go there over things I read on social media during the week that pushed me over the edge. As you know, our mosque in Matamoros, someone shot at it, and somebody that I know who is a local realtor wrote, "How could such a thing happen here?" And I read that and I thought, that is the problem. That it made me angry reading that
Well,
comment.
and Wendy, I think people now, uh, Trump bears most of the blame for this.
I
There
agree.
it is now okay to,
Right.
disparage in really
Sure.
personal terms individuals and quote the other side.
Right.
And really, what that does is dehumanize a person and a whole group of people. And and frankly, I've had to just stop looking at the Pike County Facebook pages because, I think there are a lot of keyboard cowboys.
There
But
are a ton, but the fact that somebody has that in them and they're empowered to write it. It's I love hearing what you're saying.
And but I also think, the LGBTQ population in Pike County is really vibrant and part of the community
Of
and
course.
out there. Do you know? And so it's a really weird kind of juxtaposition. And there are people who will have had other experiences. I've never had a bad experience in
Right.
Pike County, out in public, at the grocery store, in Milford, at the Dimmock Inn, or any place else.
Right.
So it's an interesting time.
It's an interesting time. It's interesting to me because you said you avoid all of those Facebook groups. I go on there specifically to read the kinds of things that people are saying. A lot of them are keyboard warriors. You're absolutely right. I think
Well, Wendy, I also think there are a lot of trolls out there. And,
there's trolls,
I feel
right.
like we have a
Absolutely.
population here that's really ripe to be influenced.
To be
by
trolled.
And, you see, a picture of a lady who has no friends, no Facebook friends. And, they start feeding all this imagery, and,
Right.
maybe that's some kind of bot campaign. I don't know. But that universe of those pages are, super troubling. And I think but I also think if you just live your life on social media, you really also have a warped perception of things. I think things are not great, but I also think that can make you, tailspin into thinking there's no hope. Everything is
100%. But, even in New York City, and I'm in the entertainment world, a lot of my friends are influenced by this one said this, and that one said that, and oh my God. And then everybody, as you know, they feed on it, right? It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
Everybody starts to feed on the thing. And you have a very healthy perspective. I largely think because you have a real job where you have to have, with what you do, you know what? You would be completely screwed if you didn't look at things that way. You have to have a really good balance with the job. You're in publishing.
Well, and the other thing, Wendy, is, this, I don't know how it will end. I mean, I believe this will end. It's whether it's with Trump leaving office. But what has happened is that, he's given permission for people to
Absolutely.
be vocal about things that they would never have talked about 10 years ago in public, right?
Right. And being vocal makes them feel very powerful, right? And the word opinion, before we had all the social media, people would have their opinions, but you might be talking to someone in the supermarket and give your opinion on something.
Right.
Now people's quote unquote opinions have been elevated to like political campaigns.
Like everyone's opinion is
unbelievable.
Is worth the same. A YouTube doctor's opinion is,
right.
Is as important as, the head of a medical school. It's
Right.
nuts.
Right. No, that, you know what? No one has ever said that, but that really puts it. I love that. And I'm stealing that from you because that is the God's honest truth. I have some very smart friends, as you do, and they will spew this garbage that they saw on YouTube. And I constantly tell people, you have to fact check it. Who is this person? 9 out of 10 times when I go to look at one of those, what I call a cockamamie video on some expert, and you start Googling or you go on ChatGPT, you find out they're a damn wackadoodle.
I mean, like, the only person I listen to on YouTube is you, Wendy.
Oh, thank you. But wait, you don't listen to Randy Rainbow? Now I'm disappointed.
I do not spend a ton of time on YouTube.
Right. No, of course. But
I know Randy Rainbow, of course. We have Randy
right.
Rainbow.
Right. There's good things that come from YouTube. So in terms of publishing, how do you find your there's so much content out there. Do you have specific writers that you work with, or people approach you? How do you go about getting your content?
Well, our team really on the print side, is constantly thinking of stories.
Right.
We have stories that we're working on. I mean, our next issue is the Pride issue, but we have things we're working on for this September, October issue. The magazines come out bi-monthly.
Yes.
And so because of that, particularly on the advocate side, we're not really dealing with day of news, right? We're not a weekly, we're not a monthly. And so the stories we tell need to be timely when they're published. And so
That's kind of like looking into a crystal ball somewhat.
It's a little bit like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit like that. Certainly for both of them, the advocate's a little more timely, but in terms of out, just for covers, we're looking at, all right, what is going to be happening? We've already done our Pride covers, but for July, August, we're saying, okay, what is happening? Who is going to be relevant in July? That is always kind of looking ahead.
But that's a very hard call. How do you go about doing that?
It's like a gut check. It's there's thought that goes into it. We had a really good run with our covers last year.
I love your new cover.
Every single cover was, either on The View or Rachel Maddow or somewhere, they resonated. We try to choose, cover subjects that are, going to be relevant to the period of time they're on the cover. But then also, it's interesting, and you probably know this, the print reader is a little older than the digital user, right?
I do both, okay?
I do both too. But, for print, whoever's on the cover really needs to be recognizable. And we don't want, if we want a cover that appeals to everybody. And it's interesting because if you pick a celebrity that is, just known to people in their 20s and early 30s, you're going to deliver a magazine to someone maybe in their 50s or 60s, and they'll have no idea who's on the cover.
That's a very good point.
Right? It's not relevant to them. And so, I don't want to call it a struggle, but one of the issues we deal with is, making sure that in these magazines, there is something for everybody. So that it doesn't matter what age or what demo you fall into. If you read out or you read The Advocate, you feel like, oh, they've seen me, they're talking to me in some way.
Right. Well, that is a very smart decision to make, because the biggest challenge, certainly, and your husband will tell you this, in theater, off Broadway, just about anything that you're going to put up on a stage, you have to say, who is your audience? How am I going to get them in? And I've constantly been going to production meetings for different things, because I'm involved in so much. And this came up last night. And I brought it up. There's a wonderful organization called the Village Trip, and they're in Manhattan. They do 2 weeks of performance, readings, tours all over the village. It's to celebrate the village. And we had a meeting last night, and they were talking about who they're getting on board and everything. And I put my hand up and I said, what's the plan to reach the younger audience? What's the plan to reach the NYU students, right? Which are all over the village now. You really have to get, and that comes up a lot, even with theater productions that we do down there, to sell tickets. How do you reach the younger audience? So I'm going to throw that out to you. How do you reach the younger audience?
Well, I mean, you have to reach them with with in print with content that's relevant to them,
Right.
and you have to, and I can't stress how important covers are. It needs to resonate with a wide range of people.
Yes.
Um, and a lot of that is judgment calls. You
Yeah.
know, someone will go through a story rundown for upcoming issues, and there'll be a profile on someone who I don't know. I mean, I try to know who a lot of people are, but there may be an editor or reporter that says, I want to do a story on so and so, and I'm like, okay,
Who
who are
is
they,
who
right?
is that?
And and that's especially true of influencers who are really
One
becoming,
hundred percent. Right.
a, a real voice in and for the community.
Right. Right. But again, that's if you're not familiar with them, that is a quick Google. I spend a lot of time on social media, not wasteful time promoting my stuff, other people's stuff. And then I sidetrack to find out who I think the good influences are, what they're trying to say. How do you reach them? Certainly, my big eye opener, on my other show, If These Walls Could Talk, I've been getting incredible musicians that are like late 50s, early 60s, and they've been making music since they're 20.
Yeah.
And they're working and they're amazing. And they're at Barry Ballroom. They're just all over, right? Guaranteed you never heard of half of them. So I like putting them on my show,
Yeah.
you know, and they all have followings, but how do we expand their followings?
Mhm.
Likewise, the Brooklyn queer community, tapping into that community is a whole other thing because I'm a part of the Glam Awards. I'm nominated every year, mostly because I get my friends to nominate me. But
Because you're so glamorous.
it's, you know what? I got to tell you, those kids turn it out from the
I
designs that they design themselves, their makeup, their hair, and you know what? They're all really nice. You don't get like the attitude that you
Right.
had in the 90s. And most of them that you talk to, I mean, they're working as barristers in coffee shops. Not that that's a bad thing, but these are not people that are employed, by Stella McCartney or big, and they're so talented. I
Mhm.
love supporting those kids and I love learning more about their community because they're doing work in clubs out there. A lot of them are really great performers unless you do the Brooklyn scene. And I try and insert it into my life. Unless you do it, you'd have no idea. You'd have
Right.
absolutely no idea. There's definitely I think, and because we're talking about publishing and how you get audiences, there is a disconnect, unless for me personally, I'm a voracious reader. I'm a person that tries to find out about everything and I try and share it with people. And I guess as a publisher, that is, that's the best that you can do. And you have to be able to do those projections. And that is really hard.
Right. I mean, that's it's you want to win more than you lose. And I think you do a pretty good job of it. But that, that's the business, right? I mean, we're looking into the future and trying to figure out what's going to be, part of the conversation in the fall, or
Right.
what's going to be part of the conversation during the holidays. Um,
Exactly. Yeah. I
it's
call it
heated,
staying
it's
relevant.
like heated rivalry. Who knew that was going to be like what it is now?
Right.
And, who knew that we would have these, four new LGBTQ stars who are going to, I think, be really, really big. I mean, you don't know.
Right. You don't know. You don't know. And all you can do is
You can
wait.
make your best. You can make your best guess based on your experience.
Yeah. And your experience, but obviously you work with a team, and I'm sure your team is of varied sensibilities and ages.
Oh
And that's what you have to have.
yeah, um, races, genders. I mean, we
It's
have
what
a
it
very
is.
diverse team, and that's really the only way you can cover this community, right? I mean, these are stories we're telling about ourselves.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
do you know? And you know, it's like it. Certainly with all the awful things happening in the trans community, like I don't know where we would be without our trans staff who are really able to, I think um, bring a sensibility to their storytelling that's really important.
Well, yeah, it's a totally different perspective, also depending on their age as well, within that community. I mean, it's incredible. My dog just came over. He makes me cough. Um, did you have to deal with celebrities a lot in your last job?
Yes.
What was that like?
What I find, and we deal with them a lot in this job too. And I will say that I have found, I'll make a general statement, there are exceptions, really big stars, really big celebrities
Yeah.
are there to get it done. They are pretty easy to work with. It is, the B or C level celebrities that, insist that I have to have a China cup at the
Right.
tea and shoot, you know, that kind of thing. Um,
Right. Right.
but I'll tell you, I've not had, generally when we ask someone to be on the cover of the Out or the Advocate, they're really excited about it.
Oh my God. How
They
absolutely.
really view it as being part of the community as a big deal.
I love it.
So I have not really had it in this job there are no horror stories.
No horror stories, right? Which
Yeah,
that's
and if you're a gay celebrity you're on the cover of Out, you want to support it. Do it's part of the community for them as well.
right.
And so we really haven't had any horror stories. Some people are easier to work with than others, but
Right.
no disasters.
I interviewed a very famous composer one time, and I love him. I'm not going to say his name, but he's incredible, and he had a reputation as being difficult. And I saw how the interaction between the two of us was really starting to drag. And I
Mhm.
said to him, I have to ask you a very personal question. And he was like, oh, I said, do people find you really difficult to work with? That broke the ice almost immediately. And he became a human being after that. And you know what? It's one of the strongest interviews I ever did. I guess none of us, we can't be afraid to put that out there. We can't be afraid to say, hey, you know what? We're just people here. We're exchanging information. We're on the same page
Right.
at the end of the day. So we are down to the wire here.
Oh
What
my
do you,
God.
you know what? I always say time flies when you're
It
having fun.
does.
You know me, I can talk forever.
I know
The
you
fact
can.
I
I know
can,
you.
and this is my second podcast today, and a million things in between. What do you hope to see going forward in our community?
I hope to see us as really vigilant
Love,
um, about our rights and vigilant about protecting each other. Um, and this is especially true, of our brothers and sisters in the trans community.
yeah,
They are really in the crosshairs now and need our support.
I love it, and I completely agree. And I'm there
Oh, I know
100%.
you are.
Yeah, no,
I see you out at everything.
I am right. And people say to me, why so much? Honest to God, I always was from junior high. And then I went through the whole
Wendy, I believe it.
I went through the whole AIDS thing, which was and always will be completely unacceptable to me. And that's just how I roll. And what's happening in the trans community right now is just completely unacceptable. And I believe we all need to get together on that within our community. Those letters LGBTQ, there's still divisions between people. I find,
and you have to, I mean, the trans community has been part of us since the beginning. And they called some of the folks who rioted at Stonewall drag queens, but they weren't.
I heard that too.
Right? They were trans people, so they have fought for our collective rights for decades.
From the beginning. So you have been an absolute delight. I loved learning more about you. I like to do this hokey little thing where I take people's pictures and then I can put them up on social media.
We have a few pictures together.
I like these because they're on the computer. Cheese. Cool. Thank you so much. I guess I will be seeing you around. I want to tell you, Bell Pepper is doing a show in Hawley on Saturday.
Bell Pepper, John Hellman is one of the bright lights out here, right?
I love it. Love it.
Pierre Zimmerman, Democrats, is incredible. We've covered him on advocate.com before. He is a real bright light. And
that's why I thought I would just throw Bell Pepper, John Hellman's name out there. I adore him. I love what he's doing. And yeah, I'm looking forward to go seeing his show on Saturday night. I hope you can make it.
Okay. Where is it?
At the Bridge.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. Have a beautiful rest of week. And we will be back next week with a very special program on a transgender project that is happening that I can't wait to share with all of you. Thank you, everyone. Good night.